Hello YouTube, this is Let's Talk Horror and welcome back to another video. So in my last video, guys, I reviewed the It 1990 miniseries, and today I'm going to be reviewing It 2017, the Andy Muschietti adaptation, and this is all in preparation for Welcome to Derry, the new HBO Max original series that's coming out in a couple of weeks. And so yeah, and that takes place within the Andy Muschietti It universe. So yeah, we are actually at the adaptation where Welcome to Derry is going to be taking place. So I'm excited to get my thoughts out on this movie. And yeah, let's jump right into it with the synopsis. So if you somehow don't know, It 2017 is about 7 young outcasts in Derry, Maine, who are about to face their worst nightmare, an ancient, shape-shifting evil that emerges from the sewer every 27 years to prey on the town's children. Banding together over the course of one horrifying summer, the friends must overcome their own personal fears to battle the murderous, bloodthirsty clown known as Pennywise. Okay, guys, but the first real positive I have to talk about here is, of course, Pennywise the dancing clown, played by Bill Skarsgård. This is still somewhat a fairly divisive portrayal in that it seems like it satisfied most Stephen King fans and most horror fans. You know, there are definitely people that like Bill Skarsgård more than Tim Curry, but there is a very vocal minority with this movie and with this performance in general that are very harsh on it. But obviously, with this being in the positive section, I don't fall into that camp. I think Bill Skarsgård did a fantastic job with this portrayal of Pennywise for what they were going for. And obviously they were going for a very different portrayal of the character and obviously a very different look of the character. And let's get into that. I have warmed up to this look of Pennywise. It's, again, fairly divisive, but I have warmed up to this look of Pennywise. Obviously, the Tim Curry Pennywise was going more for just a normal everyday clown. This one is trying to show the more sinister alien, monstrous side of Pennywise in the look, especially with the face. I like the face. I like how, you know, the kind of streaks that start the smile and then they go up through the eyes. I like that. I like the cracked kind of makeup near his forehead. I think that's really cool. I understand and have kind of grown to like and appreciate the more dated and the more ancient look that they were going for. Overall, I think Skarsgård's performance fits that as well. Kind of this more sinister clown performance, you know, kind of that more alien, inhuman performance where he takes the shape of a clown and he tries to act like a clown and can pull off some of the acts, but he can't pull them all off. It's unsettling and you can kind of tell something isn't quite right. And that leads into a criticism I hear a lot from people with this performance is that, you know, how is he supposed to lure children in with the clown look? Any child would be able to look at Bill Skarsgård and Pennywise and see how it acts and immediately run in the other direction. And I don't agree with that. First of all, the only time in this movie, and really one of the only times in the book, we see Pennywise try to lure children in, it's his main look, but the only time we really see Pennywise try to lure children in using the clown look is with Georgie in the sewer scene. You know, other than that, he's really using their fears, their insecurities to go after them. So first of all, I don't think that's a entirely fair criticism. But even going past that, like people would say, oh, well, you know, Georgie in real life would just run in the other direction and not even go near him. I mean, kids at that young age, and Georgie is like 6 or 7, they are naive. They're trusting. They don't have a full grasp of like what is creepy behavior, what is unsettling behavior, and what isn't. So I can totally buy that a kid that young wouldn't be able to get away and wouldn't be able to tell that this clown isn't entirely friendly in his interpretations. And you see a bit of that friendly clown behavior with the whole popcorn part of the speech, the pop, 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 that I thought was kind of friendly. So I don't agree with that. I think it's a little bit of an unfair assessment. And overall, watching the scene again, you can tell that Georgie, he's a little uncomfortable. He wants to get away. He knows something isn't quite right, but he can't. And that leads into another thing about the book where, even though in many cases, the Losers Club and, the children of Derry and their interactions with Pennywise in the book, even though when they're interacting with Pennywise and even though they know something isn't right, there's a fear, there's a power Pennywise has over them. And he almost like puts them in a trance so they can't get away. Like they know something isn't right, but there's this like pull he has. There's this power he has that pulls them in to where they can't get away. And so I think that also fits here. But overall, yeah, I don't really agree with that criticism of this Pennywise. And, the people who say like, oh, there's no way a kid could be fooled by that clown. Like, why? Because you think so? But why? Because you say so? The truth is, Georgie is young enough. Yeah, I think it's totally believable that even though he knows something isn't right, he can't get away. He kind of gets sucked in a little bit, and then overall he gets his arm bitten off. But anyway, I just wanted to get that out there because I hear that criticism all the time, and I just wanted to give my perspective on it. But overall, yeah, I think for this, I think Pennywise and I think Bill Skarsgård, this is a fantastic modern, different interpretation of Pennywise, and I think Bill Skarsgård knocks it out of the park and makes it pretty terrifying in his own right. He makes the role his own. So yeah, Pennywise is still a huge positive for this movie. Okay, guys, but that leads us to the opposite end of the spectrum with the Losers Club, and I'm very happy to say that the Losers Club in this movie is a huge, huge positive. I think they knocked it out of the park with the casting and with the performances of these characters. I think they all fit these characters perfectly. Jaden Martell as Bill, he certainly has his moments. His performance is great in this as, the leader of the Losers Club. Finn Wolfhard is obviously the one everyone remembers and the standout as Richie. And he has some of the funniest lines of the movie, and his interactions with Eddie are some of the funniest of the entire movie. You couldn't have found a more perfect child actor to play this character than Finn Wolfhard, and he completely knocks it out of the park. But I would say Sophia Lillis as Beverly also is outstanding. And then Jack Grazer as Eddie also is very funny, and he has his moments as well. And he plays the character perfectly. So, those are the four really standouts of the Losers Club for me. Stan, Ben, and Mike get a little less screen time. They get a little less focus, but they have their moments as well. But overall, I would say all of these actors and this entire cast as the Losers Club knocked it out of the park, and they play their characters perfectly. And even when they're not battling Pennywise, even when they're off doing their own thing, I enjoy watching this group of kids interact and joke around and spend their summer together. They really do their job as the heart of this story and as the heart of this movie, because really at the end of the day, even though the book and the story is literally named after Pennywise, and Pennywise is the villain that everyone remembers, the heart of the story is the Losers Club. It's the Losers Club story, and Pennywise is a part of that story. And luckily, especially with the part of the story following the Losers Club as children, they really knock it out of the park with the casting and the performances here. So the Losers Club is another major positive. Okay, guys, but another positive I have for this movie is just that the clown gloves are off. One of the complaints I had with the miniseries was that not only is it dated, but that you could tell it was censored because it was made for TV. Here, we get this movie, which is, a rated R, 2 hour and 15-minute horror movie, and we get to fully explore the horrors and the heart of this story. First with the horrors, of course, we got to talk about that Georgie scene, that opening scene where we actually see Georgie's arm get ripped off. I remember sitting in the theater back then and just stunned that they actually showed it to its full extent. I was not expecting that at all, but I kind of love that they did that too, that like they knew a lot of their audience was going to be going into this with the memory and the expectations of the miniseries. I thought it was great, and I thought it was quite the gut punch, but I thought it was great that they showed it and just showed how far they could go with the violence. And they certainly do go far with the violence here. But also, I think it helps with the interactions of the Losers Club in general. Again, as much as I loved the kids in the 1990 miniseries, there was something about their interactions and their conversation that felt a little bit too clean and censored, and it didn't feel fully realistic when it comes to how like preteen or teenage boys or kids talk. Here, I mean, even though obviously this is not a childhood I lived, listening to these conversations of the Losers Club, and in particular the interactions between Richie and Eddie, I mean, it reminded me of jokes and conversations and interactions I would have with my friends when I was, 12, 13, 14. And it was so hilarious. And so in that way, it did kind of bring me back to my childhood. And I thought that was great. So I think it really helps there that they were able to go further, not only in the violence this movie shows and in some of the sequences, but in the interactions with the Losers Club that I think really helped this. Because obviously, in the television miniseries, they couldn't cuss or anything like that. Here, anything goes, and I think it really helped with the interactions and the relationships with the Losers Club. So overall, the Clown Gloves being off for this movie on both ends of the spectrum was a huge positive for this movie. And to go off that, as far as scares go, there's a good mix of iconic scenes that we remember from both the book and the miniseries that are in here as well. And some new scares and some new scenes that this movie is kind of remembered and sticks out for. As far as older scenes go, of course, we have the iconic interaction between Georgie and Pennywise. I said, I love that scene. I love how much they showed what they showed. And then to end the scene with Pennywise's hand creepily coming out of the sewer and pulling Georgie in, I thought was great. We also get the Beverly drain scene with Pennywise. Not only is that good, and not only does the scene here do the original scene in the miniseries and the book justice, but there's more emotional depth with the scene, in my opinion, that they can explore because it's a rated R horror film. And they can explore some things and some themes that are going on that maybe they couldn't have explored in the miniseries. So I like that. We get the whole Neibold Street, the house on Neibold Street makes an appearance here, and I think that whole sequence is great. But then we also get some new kind of original scenes, like Bill's interactions with Pennywise at his house and is totally different. And his kind of interaction with Georgie is totally different from the book and the miniseries. It's not a school picture anymore like it was in the miniseries. And the depths they go to show that in here are pretty fucked up. I'm just going to leave it at that, And then finally, we get another great scene with in fact, one of my favorite scenes coming out of my first viewing and still to this day is the projector scene when they're, looking at the sewer system and the tunnels under Derry, and the whole projector scene with Pennywise there. I thought that was great. And, easily the best jump scare in the movie. We also see Eddie's leper here, which is cool as well. But yeah, the projector scene was kind of the standout scene for me when I first got out of seeing the movie back in 2017, and it still stands out here. It was easily the biggest scene that went over in the movie theater. And I also want to address another complaint I hear, which is too many jump scares. And I don't fully agree with that because, yeah, there are a lot of jump scares here, guys. But I don't necessarily think jump scares are a terrible thing for a horror movie. I think what people get annoyed with, and personally what I get annoyed with, is like fake out jump scares. And this movie doesn't have a lot of fake out jump scares. The jump scares it does have, there's a lot of tension, there's a lot of build up, and there's a good payoff. So I don't really understand why that's a problem. But overall, yeah, guys, a lot of good scares in this movie. We get a good mix of the iconic scenes that we all know and love about the story and about it. And then we get some new kind of scenes that stand out as well. So a lot of good scares in this film. Of course, I do have to mention that they did move up the timeline in this movie from where it was in the book and where it was in the miniseries. In the book, in particular, the first Pennywise cycle where the Losers Club fights Pennywise's children, that happens in the 1950s. And then the next cycle where they fight him as adults happens in the 1980s. Here, the first cycle where they fight him as kids happens in the 1980s. I think moving it up was necessary. I do think moving up the timeline was necessary. They don't hit you over the head with the 80s aesthetic, and I know we're all kind of burnt out on 80s nostalgia at this point, but they don't hit you over the head with the 80s aesthetic. It's just something to where it can relate to modern audiences a little bit better. There's just enough 80s aesthetic to where anyone who grew up in that age could be nostalgic for it and enjoy it. But it's something to help with relating to modern audiences, because let's be honest, reading the book for the second time recently, some of Pennywise's forms and some of the stuff in that book is a little bit dated. Like Pennywise being the Wolfman or being the Mummy is a little bit dated because not a lot of kids have that fear. There aren't too many kids that are deathly afraid of the Wolfman these days or deathly afraid of the Mummy. So I think it was necessary to update the timeline, and I think it worked pretty effectively without hitting the audience over the head. And then finally, my final positive is just the town of Derry in general. And pretty much the idea that it and Derry are one and that Pennywise has some sort of control, some level of control over Derry. And we get to see that, whether it's through his interactions with Henry Bowers, the most evil kid in town, or the kind of like weird like kid show that is playing, like urging kids to go near the sewers that you hear in the background at points, or even, the weird creepy interactions between Beverly and Mr. Nell. Without hitting you over the head, they do explore that Pennywise does have this control over Derry and prevents the adults of Derry, the people of Derry, to see what's really going on. Yeah, again, and even the scene with Ben and Henry where he's about to cut into his stomach and those people drive by and they don't stop or help or they ignore what's going on, and then you see a balloon in the back seat. I thought that was pretty cool. So overall, I like that they explored that, because that is included in the book. This idea that Pennywise and Derry are one, and Pennywise has this control over Derry that helps him hunt the children of Derry without being caught. So I think that was a cool idea that they explored a little bit here. And overall, I just wanted to also say I thought the music was great as well. Particularly that main theme that plays at the beginning of the film and over the end credits. There's something so beautiful and so haunting about that. So I think the music is great. I think that the setting in the town of Derry is really well portrayed and really well done here. So yeah. But okay, guys, as much as I've defended this movie at points and as much as I've praised this movie and made it pretty clear that I enjoy it, I do have some negatives that I agree with some of its critics on. And one of them is the CGI. I do think there was quite a bit of overuse of CGI, particularly at the end of the movie. First of all, with Pennywise's fangs at different points, you could definitely tell that's CGI, and that's a little distracting. But at the end of the movie, we get glimpses of like the spider and the Mummy, particularly with the final fight in the sewer between the Losers Club and Pennywise. It is quite noticeable. The amount of CGI they use is distracting. They do go overboard with it a little bit, and it doesn't look terrible, but it doesn't look great, and it is a little bit distracting, and it took me out of the movie a little bit. So I will agree with that the overuse of CGI is a bit of a problem. They used it a little bit too much. So that is probably my main negative that I do have with this film. And my other negative is that this movie does tend to fall for a few horror movie kind of tropes. First of all, as much as I praise the scares in this movie is pretty good, a good mix of old and new earlier in the video. There is the Stan's interaction with Pennywise, it just being this painting that he's scared of, particularly this lady in the painting that he's scared of. The CGI isn't good there, and to me it's bland. It's forgettable. It's just a bland horror movie scare. Patrick Hockstetter's death, when he goes into the sewers and he encounters Pennywise and these like zombie children, again, it was okay, but it was just kind of a fairly forgettable horror movie scare. But then we also get, just kind of bland horror movie tropes with the characters. We get at the end of the movie, Beverly's in the deadlights and she's in a trance, and to get her out of it, Ben kisses her to get her out of it. It's just kind of cringy. And then we get the whole, it wants to divide us scene. Not really the scene, but the line in general is just, again, kind of, we've heard that many times before in other horror movies. So it does fall victim here and there to some bland horror movie cliches. And then finally, guys, it does feel like some of the characters, particularly Mike and Ben, get the cold shoulder as far as exposure goes and as far as screen time. And it feels like we don't get to know those characters quite as much, although not as much as I initially thought, but still, it is a little bit of a problem. Mike and Ben, they don't quite get as much attention and spotlight put on them as characters as Beverly or Bill or Richie or whoever. So they seem to be a little bit lacking as far as spotlight goes on their characters. Although, again, not as much as I seemingly thought the first few times I saw it. So, but overall, guys, if you can't tell, I really enjoyed this movie. Now, look, did it live up to the hype that I initially had? No, because the hype when this was initially coming out was through the roof. If I remember correctly, Joe Hill, Stephen King's son, actually said, hey, I've seen a screening of this, and it's going to go down and be remembered as one of the 5 scariest movies ever. It's going to be considered right up there with The Thing and The Exorcist. I'm going to say, guys, do I think it quite lived up to the hype as far as that goes? No. But do I think this is still one of the better Stephen King adaptions out there? This is probably in, my top 10 or my top 5 Stephen King adaptions. Yes, I do. And I know this movie still has a vocal minority of haters that love to shit on it for whatever reason. But I think it's a damn good Stephen King adaptation. I think it's a damn good adaptation of the story of It. Horror with heart. That's what the story of It is. And this is horror with heart. We get a lot of good, scary, memorable scenes. The Losers Club is almost perfectly done here. It's horror with heart. And I think they really captured that in this movie. And I'm going to give It 2017 a 9 out of 10. I think there are some, with the CGI and other kind of nitpicky flaws that hold it back a little bit. But overall, I still think this is a damn good adaptation of It and one of the better overall Stephen King adaptations out there. And if you disagree with it, that's fine. Let me know in the comment section below and we can discuss. But that's going to do it for me today, guys. Thanks for tuning in today, and I will see you guys later. Okay, take care.